Welcome to the first part of our instructional video on creating spiritual formation outcomes. In this section, we will explore the importance of combining Bloom's taxonomy with Fowler's stages of faith development as the first step in creating spiritual formation outcomes. Understanding these frameworks individually and recognizing their combined potential can enhance our approach to Christian education. Bloom's taxonomy, developed by Benjamin Bloom and his colleagues in the 1950s, is a hierarchical model used to classify educational learning objectives into levels of complexity. The taxonomy comprises of 6 cognitive levels, namely remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Each level represents a step in the learning process, starting with the basic recall of facts, remember, to the ability to produce original work, which is to create. They are known as the cognitive domain. Bloom's taxonomy also has 2 other domains, the affective, which involves feelings, attitudes, and emotions, and psychomotor domain, which includes the ability of learners to physically accomplish tasks and perform movement and skills. Christian educators have been using Bloom's cognitive domain in educational settings to design spiritual formation outcomes in Bible curriculums, but it promotes higher order thinking. The concern with this traditional approach to develop spiritual formation outcomes is that spiritual formation is reduced to a purely academic exercise, and though this may capture the mind, it falls short of capturing the heart. Considering the words of Paul in 2 Corinthians 11:3, "But I'm afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ." When we look at Bloom's taxonomy, we see a striking resemblance to the words Jesus said in Matthew 22:37-40, that we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and mind. And from these scriptures, it becomes evident that there is a hierarchy found within Christian education, namely the spiritual domain, or the heart, the affective domain, referred to in Scripture as the soul, and the cognitive domain, referred to as our mind. So if we are going to develop spiritual formation outcomes, we cannot rely on the traditional approach of using Bloom's cognitive domain. Rather, we need a spiritual domain that may supplement Bloom's taxonomy and draw from Bloom's methodology to develop outcomes. And this is where Fowler's stages of faith development is extremely useful. James Fowler's stages of faith development was introduced in the 1980s, and it provides a framework for understanding faith development and spiritual growth across one's lifespan. Fowler outlines 6 stages: intuitive projective faith, mythic literal faith, synthetic conventional faith, individuative reflective faith, conjunctive faith, and universalizing faith. Each stage reflects a deeper, more complex level of faith. Fowler's model is particularly useful in Christian education as it highlights the progressive nature of faith formation. By identifying the key characteristics and needs of individuals at different stages, we are able to develop a spiritual domain hierarchy that could supplement Bloom's taxonomy. Fowler's stages of faith development includes the age range where a stage will take place. For example, stage 1, intuitive projective faith, faith ranges from ages 3 to 7. Faith at this stage is imaginative, without logic or coherence. This stage is highly influenced by stories, symbols, and emotions, and instills a deep awareness of biblical narratives and concepts. Stage 2, the mythical literal faith, ranges from ages 7 to 12. At this stage, faith becomes more concrete and literal. Children begin to understand the world through stories and moral rules. Stage 3, the synthetic conventional faith, ranges from ages 12 to adult. Faith at this stage is influenced by peers and authority figures as students start to interpret and begin to synthesize various beliefs into a coherent system, and this stage culminates with the students starting to integrate faith. Considering that K-12 deals with ages 5 through 17, We may construct a spiritual domain hierarchy by extracting the key identifiers from the various stages. Drawing from Fowler's work, it becomes clear that spiritual formation starts with awareness and culminates with integration of truth into day-to-day activities. Therefore, we are able to construct a supplementary taxonomy that starts with awareness, progressing to understanding, developing into interpreting, and culminating in integration. Where awareness refers to a student showing a deep awareness of scripture and biblical concepts. Understanding, on the other hand, refers to a student showing an understanding of what the scripture or biblical content means. Whereas interpretation refers to a student being able to interpret what the scripture or biblical content means for them and the world around them. And finally, integration would refer to a student who is integrating biblical truth and concepts into their day-to-day activity. So now that we have a theoretical framework, we are able to move to the next part, which is to look at the step-by-step use of the spiritual domain hierarchy to develop spiritual formation outcomes using Bloom's methodology. This process involves 4 simple steps to help you create specific, measurable, and achievable spiritual formation outcomes. Step 1. Begin by setting a clear time frame for your learning objective. Think, what will this outcome be achieved? For example, upon completion of this course. This simple phrase sets a specific endpoint for the formation process. It also creates awareness for both teacher and student as to when the outcome is expected to occur. Step 2. Add the student as the performer of the action. Think, who is expected to work towards this outcome? For example, upon completion of this course, the student will. This simple addition clearly shows that the student has an active role in the spiritual formation process. Step 3. The third step is where spiritual formation outcomes differs from academic outcomes. At this stage, you would refer to Bloom's verbs to determine what level of the taxonomy you would like to create an outcome for. However, considering that the spiritual domain differs from the cognitive domain, a list of verbs has been compiled to help create outcomes that align with the spiritual domain. The verbs are drawn from Bloom's list and a few new verbs are introduced to better align with the spiritual domain. So let's get back to step number 3. Choose an appropriate action verb that aligns with the level of the spiritual domain you are targeting. Think, do I want the student to be aware of, maybe understand, or even integrate a biblical concept? For example, upon completion of this course, the student will be able to summarize. Remember, the verb you select should correspond to the specific spiritual formation level you aim to instill. Step 4. To complete the outcome, simply add the biblical content or narrative that you want the student to engage in. Think, what truth or Bible narrative do you want the student to engage with? For example, upon completion of this course, the student will be able to summarize the story of Noah. This 4-step approach provides clear spiritual formation outcomes. Following these simple steps, you can create clear spiritual formation outcomes that guide students' faith journey. I hope this approach helps you to foster a deeper awareness, understanding, interpretation, and integration of biblical teachings in students' lives. Thank you for watching.